Uh, but know that those are there for our friends and our family and for our community as well. So when I was growing up, I'm sure like many of you here, I played a variety of different sports. I wasn't really good at many of them, or almost none of them, except for baseball. I loved playing baseball as a young boy and as a young man. I spent a lot of springs and summers playing baseball, and both just pickup games and on organized leagues. When I look back to, I think probably the best thing that I enjoyed most, or the thing that I enjoyed most, is because I was really good at it, was batting. I was an absolute phenomenal hitter. And usually because of that, I was usually asked to bat cleanup, to bring in the people who were on the bases. Because like I said, I was such a strong batter. Now my outfielding though, was a bit of a different story. So I usually was placed, might be a nice word, out in right field with the least likelihood that I would have to actually encounter doing anything other than batting. So at every game, I would just be silently out there. But my coach had to play me. I had to play on the field if I was going to bat. So I'm sure that was quite bittersweet for him. Now, quite often, I would hit multiple home runs in a single game. I'm not bragging, but I was good. I'll just throw it out there. I was good. Now, on those days, when I would knock in multiple runs, and I would be hailed as a hero. And people would be like, yeah, Jason, yeah. But there were also days that unexpected fly ball would come out to right field. Not only would I more often than not catch it, I didn't have the strength and the upper arm strength to actually get the ball back into the infield. So usually I didn't prevent any runs from being scored or get anyone from being out. And unlike calling me a hero on the good days, on those days, my teammates would often tell me that I threw like a girl. My friends, will you pray with me? Oh, gracious and loving God, we are so thankful to be once again gathered as a community to witness to your love and to offer our worship, that it might be acceptable to you, O God. As you continue to guide this community each and every step of the way. And may the words of my mouth and the meditation of each and every heart be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Amen. So this week, kind of what we did last summer, where we traveled the books of Samuel, we're going to begin a journey through the book of Exodus and the stories of Moses. Now, these stories have a lot to teach us about the journey of God's people from slavery to freedom. And they also have implications for our lives today, right here in 21st century Cleveland, Ohio. The life of Moses and the journey of God's people from bondage to liberation shows us the importance of our faithfulness to God and highlights our personal and community responsibility of keeping covenant with God and with each other. Now, I think a little context will help us as we begin this journey, though. The Israelites came to Egypt, fleeing a famine. Now, Joseph, the youngest son of Jacob, he got to be kind of a big shot in Egypt, kind of a top dog. And because of that position, he secured a place of safety for his people in the land of Egypt. But many years have gone by, and at this point, a new Pharaoh has ascended the throne. And this new Pharaoh doesn't have the same respect for the Israelites that his predecessor did. In fact, he actually fears the Israelites because their numbers are beginning to grow. And he fears that they might one day side with the enemies of Egypt and help overthrow Egypt. So he's afraid. So the Pharaoh, in order to make his throne more secure, position of his kingdom more secure, he orders that Hebrew baby boys should be killed when the midwives attend to the birth of these boys, the midwives should kill these children. And of course, we know from our reading that these midwives don't comply with this decree, with this order. And of course, when the Pharaoh discovers that he's not being obeyed, he issues another command. And this time, not just to the midwives, but to all of Egypt. He says that all newborn Hebrew boys shall be thrown into the Nile River. So this river that represents the life of Egypt is now stained with death. And that's where we're picking up kind of our today's reading, and as we move into the second part of into Exodus chapter 2. And this is the atmosphere in which Moses is born, kind of the background of what's going on in the country and in his environment. From the time of his birth, Moses was under a death sentence. Now we learn that his mother tries to hide him, and does, in fact, for 3 months before she's forced to part with him for his safety. And she finally puts him into a basket and sends him down the river, apparently in hopes that he would be found and taken care of. Now his sister, of course, she's part of the story too. She keeps watch as this basket's floating down the river until he is eventually pulled out by one of the maids of Pharaoh's daughter, a princess of Egypt. And there's a couple things I think we often might miss in this story. First, that the princess is surely aware, has to be aware of Pharaoh's command that all the Hebrew boys must be killed. After all, he has issued this command not only once, but twice. And second, she knows that this baby is a Hebrew. But in her compassion, she decides not to follow the decree of her father, the decree of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, when we hear this story, we often think that it is primarily about Moses. And it is partly. I mean, after all, the stories of Exodus are about the life of Moses and the journey of God's people. And this is really the story where Moses is introduced to the world. But I think when we examine these verses more carefully, we see that the protagonist, the main characters, the good guys, if you will, that they're all women. So the good guys are actually the good gals. Now, the women in this story are doing the work of justice. The midwives actually plan a way around Pharaoh's decree. The mother of Moses defies the command by hiding her child for 3 months and then offering him escape. The sister of Moses watches over him, ensuring that he will find safety. And of course, the maids and the daughter of Pharaoh openly defy the father's law by providing asylum to this child, by helping him escape this death sentence. So the women in our story are the heroines, the ones who are standing up for truth rather than blindly following an unjust or cruel law. Now, this decree of Pharaoh is twofold. The first part, and the part that we tend to, I think, remember most often, myself included, when I say we, is that all the boys are killed. Something we remember, we resonate with that. Maybe not resonate, but it's something that sticks in our head. But Pharaoh's decree does not stop there. There's a second part of his decree. The second part says, "But you shall let every girl live." He says that twice. "But you shall let every girl live." So the great ruler of Egypt does not see girls and women as a threat. He does not believe that they have any power to disrupt his rule or to influence the destiny of Egypt. To him, the women just don't really matter in this story. However, it is the women who foil his plan. It is the women who are the ones who stand up for God's justice and confront a powerful man in a society that is controlled by men. It is the women who, in fact, act as God's agents that this child might live. Now, at this point in the story of Exodus and the story of God's people, we have seen women pitted against each other, particularly when we look back in the stories that were offered in Genesis. We have Sarah and Hagar, who were never able to overcome the power of Abraham. Of course, Rachel and Leah, who have a constant rivalry in their marriage to Jacob. But the women in this story, as the story of the Exodus begins, they take a different path. Rather than competing and fighting with each other because of the circumstances that have been set in place by a powerful man in their lives, they're able to work together with integrity, with truth, to secure not only the future of Moses, but the future of God's people. And of course, on the surface, these women are so different in so many ways. There are class and social and racial differences. And the stage is set up for them to not like each other. In fact, probably for them to hate each other. But in acting together and acting for justice, they set in motion the reality that still affects our lives today. Because of them, Moses grew up. Because of them, God's people are freed from slavery and journey to the promised land. And because of them, we see the rise of David and Solomon, and eventually even the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, it is likely that God would have accomplished all of this without these women. But their courage to stand up against injustice, to set in motion a chain of events that still impacts our lives today, is there for us to witness. God uses the marginalized in this world to accomplish God's purposes. And of course, our most perfect example of this is the son of a manual laborer in a backwater little town that grew up in poverty, who we all know better as Jesus Christ, our Savior. And in our world today, we know that women are still not valued in the same way as men. There's an ongoing double standard in many areas. Women are expected to do the same work for less money. Women are less likely to be believed when reporting sexual assault. And we teach our girls to be accommodating and demure while excusing our boys' bad behavior with words like, boys will be boys. So my question for us is, when did throwing like a girl become a bad thing? I wish all of us in this room and in this world had the strength that the women at the beginning of Moses' life had. I wish we could all throw like those girls. Throw out our differences in favor of a common good. Throw out our anger in favor of reconciliation. And throw out intolerance and disrespect in favor of God's justice. So it is my prayer this day and for every day forward that we can all throw like a girl. May it be so, my friends. I invite you into singing our next hymn. It's actually printed in your bulletin on page 4, A Mother Lined a Basket. I invite you to rise in body.